Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Hawks Latest, your number one source for news, updates, rumors, opinions, and you guessed it, the latest and the greatest regarding the Atlanta Hawks. I'm your host, Zach Langley, aka Langley ATL, and today we've got a packed episode that's going to talk about several things going on with the team. We're going to dive into a hilarious interview with Georges Niang, the former Hawk sharpshooter, who found himself unexpectedly swapped out in a major offseason deal, the one that we all know and are very fond of for the most part. We're also going to discuss which player loss may have hurt the Hawks most next season, and despite all their aggressive improvements this summer, losing a few of these key players is going to hurt in some specific areas, and we're going to break that down, and I'm going to give my insight on what I think the biggest player loss is really, and how it's going to affect the team next year. Then we're going to turn our attention to the current free agent market. Free agency is still going on. Atlanta has one roster spot left, and I'm going to talk about two potential uses of that, and it's going to dial in on some big men. Last video we talked about some guards they could potentially use with that, and we have the real focus that Atlanta is going to try and get a third big with that last roster spot. So we're going to break down two people we haven't really talked about on this channel. So without further ado, let's jump right into it and talk about Georges Niang. So in early July, the Atlanta Hawks were part of that three-team trade that sent Kristaps Porzingis to Atlanta and Georges Niang to the Boston Celtics. The move was mostly a financial decision for Boston. They sent out Porzingis to acquire Niang just to really shed salary. His contract is significantly smaller at $8.2 million, and it will be expiring. The Celtics cleared over $22 million in salary. It helps them avoid the harsh penalties of the NBA's second apron, which has really handicapped a lot of teams in this new CBA. But I mean, from a pure basketball perspective, it was a move that did spark backlash among Celtics fans, and Niang knows it. He's very self-aware. Niang is a vet's vet. He definitely was very entertaining in his half a season with the Atlanta Hawks. I'm glad we didn't really bring him back because he's kind of limited as a player, but he does have one specific strength. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. But Niang appeared on a podcast with Udonis Haslem and Mike Miller, and he delivered some self-aware and kind of hilarious commentary. He said, "I'm a Boston kid, and then I get traded for Porzingis. You know how tough Boston fans are. They don't care if I'm from Boston or not. They're like, you took our unicorn and replaced it with a minivan. Get out of here." So Niang's nickname is obviously the minivan. It couldn't contrast more from the Porzingis, the unicorn, that he's had over the course of his career just because of his elite skill set at 7'2". One is a high-flying, floor-spacing, shot-blocking 7-footer. The other one is a hard-nosed role player. No diss to Niang, but they're definitely not comparable as players. Niang is a good locker room presence, though, and he's going to do good things in Boston if he gets a little bit of a playing role. I don't expect him to. Right now, he's actually projected to start while Tatum's hurt. I don't think Boston's going to go that route. I think they're going to continue to maybe make another move or two this offseason, kind of fill out that roster a little more. But nonetheless, we appreciate Georges Niang for his time here. He definitely is someone who provided a great presence as a veteran, and he was a good shooter, real good trash talker, definitely an interesting player. Like I said, his contributions were valuable, but in this deal, it was Porzingis the Hawks wanted, and they got him at a cheap price. The Celtics needed cap relief, and so that is unfortunately where he ended up, and he's got to deal with a fan base that is going to be at his every move, just waiting for him to mess up once so they can trade him. It's unfair, but Niang will handle it. He's a vet's vet. His humor and maturity handling it are commendable. So now we're going to talk about which player loss is going to hurt Atlanta the most this next season, because Atlanta has had a great offseason. They've acquired new guys like Porzingis, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Luke Kennard, Asa Newell. The list goes on. They retained key young talent, and they bolstered their rotation, all while trimming long-term salary. Just a great offseason, but it wasn't easy. They've had to part ways with several of the guys that, not just the guys that have been there for a long time, but some guys they acquired at the trade deadline last year that did make big contributions. To improve, you got to give something up. So the question is, which departure this offseason is going to hurt Atlanta the most next season? So let's break it down, some of the strengths and some of the how Atlanta replaced it and how they potentially didn't replace it. So Georges Niang, who we just talked about, he was elite as a floor spacer. Definitely a very good three-point shooter. He had some of his best career numbers as a Hawk, but the Hawks did replace him specifically with an even better perimeter shooter and a more experienced player who has played at a higher level and has definitely contributed to winning a little more. And honestly, we can't even really say that because Georges Niang, for some reason, has like a ridiculous all-time record. He's like one of the most winningest. He's the most winningest player of like the 2020s. It's something ridiculous. Larry Nance Jr. Was another guy that Atlanta lost this offseason. He was vital in the locker room. He was steady on the floor. His loss is more cultural than tactical, but it's still significant. I mean, filling that vet presence is going to be difficult, and Atlanta might prioritize that with the 15th roster spot. Terrence Mann was someone who brought an excellent wing defense, and while Nickeil Alexander-Walker should fill that gap, Mann's physicality and experience will be easy to replicate. Nickeil's obviously a better defender, I think, in 2025, but having real depth at the backup wing, just kind of in terms of like defensive traits and everything, it's valuable. And for an Atlanta team that has struggled with defense at times, but they are changing their identity, losing any type of defender is not ideal. Clint Capella is probably the biggest name that Atlanta lost this offseason. Atlanta did upgrade overall by getting Kristaps Porzingis and then rounding out the big room with Asa Newell, and then you got guys like Mo Gay that are still on the roster and Onyeka Okongwu. So they did improve overall, but there was one specific trait from Capella that is going to be a little more difficult to replace. His rebounding was essential. His ability to clean the glass marked up some of the Hawks' defensive shortcomings. Jalen Johnson and Onyeka Okongwu will need to step up in a big way to really fill that void. And Jalen, while he played, he was statistically the best rebounding forward in basketball last year. We just need him to stay healthy. And that has obviously been a concern, and it's going to be a concern going forward until he proves that he can stay on the floor. But I don't think it should be too big of a problem. I think these guys will step up and get on the glass more. I think that'll be prioritized. Because even though Clint really regressed as an athlete over the past year or two, his rebounding was something that did remain consistent. The most underrated, though, and potentially damaging loss for the Hawks this offseason was Caris LeVert. So LeVert was acquired at the deadline. He was only with the Hawks for half a season, but his real ability to create offense in the second unit was absolutely crucial, especially minutes without Trae Young. He did great in the non-trade minutes. He really kept the offense afloat because he's a very good shot creator. Not a very good playmaker, but a good shot creator. And Atlanta's going, I guess, a different route this offseason with the acquisitions of Nickeil and Nah, and Nickeil and then Luke Kennard, decent playmakers, but not great like on-ball scorers, the ability to just go get a basket for yourself. They're going a bit of a different route. LeVert's definitely going to be missed in that second unit. I mean, without LeVert, though, the Hawks are going to need guys like Nah and Kennard and maybe V. Krejci and Kobe Buffkin to really be able to show that they can create off the dribble, because this was huge. In late game scenarios last season, Caris LeVert could go get a bucket if you needed him to in a late game scenario, and that was crucial to some of Atlanta's wins. And they're not really going to have that guy in the second unit unless one of these guys steps up with their on-ball creation. In my view, LeVert's loss is going to be the toughest to replace, and while I still believe the bench has enough to hold its own, there's a bit more pressure to now produce in the non-trade minutes just because they don't really have a proven creator in that second unit. So with that being said, I'm going to start talking about free agency, and two guys I'm going to highlight, and I think both of these guys would be very good uses of that 15th roster spot. Never expect anything huge with the last roster spot. I know there have been certain NBA fan bases in the recent days that have just been so upset of what their team's been doing with their final roster spot, but this is something you can never expect someone to just bring in a splash signing with their 15th spot. But one name that could help, kind of fortify Atlanta's front court is Precious Achiuwa. The 25-year-old free agent is still on the market, and it's a bit surprising just because of his age and what he's been able to contribute in the NBA so far. He has his limitations, but originally drafted in 20th overall in 2020, Achiuwa has played for the Heat, Raptors, and most recently the Knicks. He played very well against the Hawks last season, ironically enough. His offensive development has stalled, but defensively he's a menace. He's a very good defender, just not a very capable offensive player, at least so far in his NBA career. At 6'8", 225, he brings pretty good lateral quickness for a big and can guard multiple positions. He's kind of small for a center, but Atlanta has no problem dealing with small centers. That they've believed in Okongwu for a long time, and he is definitely undersized. And now with Kristaps Porzingis and Asa Newell and Mo Gay, I definitely think there's a little more room to bring in a third big who's not the biggest because of the skill set he provides. He thrives in switching schemes, something head coach Quinn Snyder could utilize in the second units. The Hawks wouldn't need Achua to do much offensively. That's the thing. Whoever they're bringing in as a big would be a third big. His lack of shooting and half-court offense seriously limits him, but, I mean, in 20 minutes per game last season, he still averaged 6.6 points and 5.6 rebounds. I mean, that's acceptable production from a guy who isn't playing that much, and he would definitely play less than 20 minutes per game in Atlanta. He had a bit of an increased role in New York due to injuries and everything, but if all you're asking for is energy, defense, switching, effort off the bench, especially at the vet minimum, I really don't mind it at all. If Atlanta signs him, he wouldn't be a nightly rotation guy. Neither of these guys that I'm mentioning in today's video are going to be nightly rotation guys, but just kind of guys that either fit the timeline or provide a good veteran presence, or just we got to be smart with that last roster spot. Having a versatile, switch-heavy big man in your back pocket, that's worth That's worth the final roster spot. So now, the last guy we're going to mention is a veteran that y'all are going to be pretty familiar with, 37-year-old DeAndre Jordan. And I know every time I mention any type of super old guy to fill that last roster spot, it's always met with some backlash. But this is a vet who can still contribute in a way that Atlanta would probably need some contributions in. Hear me out. Jordan obviously isn't the all-NBA force he was about a decade ago, but he brings two things Atlanta desperately needs in that second unit. Experience and a traditional center skill set. He was the backup for Nikola Jokic in Denver. He averaged just 12 minutes a game, so he didn't really play too much, but he still grabbed over 5 boards a night and offered a strong pick-and-roll lob presence, something Atlanta definitely could use. He'd give the Hawks a much different look than either Porzingis or Okongwu. He's just a classic rim runner with raw power and verticality. On pick-and-rolls with Trae Young or Dyson Daniels, Jordan could still find himself catching lobs and finishing with authority. He's someone who, as a third big, is a reliable lob threat, but the most important part is his veteran presence. He's a respected voice in the locker room, and he would be very good for a young Atlanta team who's also striving for contention this year. He's a former All-Star. Jordan would be a stabilizing figure. He has a lot of winning experience. They're eyeing a postseason run, so why not use your last roster spot on a guy who can kind of fill the vet void that they're going to miss with Larry Nance Jr. not being here? I think they should definitely get a vet with that last spot. I would definitely lean Jordan over Achua, but just let me know in the comments. He's not a nightly rotation piece anymore, not at all, and he shouldn't be, but in spot minutes or in any sort of injury situation, Jordan would give Atlanta some reliable depth and toughness, and I think it would be a very smart use of that last roster spot. It's a low-risk, high-culture signing that could quickly benefit this team behind the scenes and on the court. So to recap, Georges Niang is on his way to Boston, and he definitely is embracing that role as kind of he's going to have to prove himself nonetheless. His self-awareness is real. While the Hawks have improved across the board this offseason, Karis LeVert's shot creation will be missed the most unless others can step up. But, there's several voids that Atlanta needs to fill, and we're not going to know how it works until they suit up on the court together, but I'm feeling good about it. And finally, keep your eye on two big men that are still out there for Atlanta's final roster spot, Precious Achiuwa and DeAndre Jordan. Both could fit perfectly into Atlanta's roster. They need several different things for that last roster spot, and I like what both of them contribute. So let me know what you think in the comments. Would you rather go Achiuwa or Jordan? And which player loss do you think will sting the most next season? I could definitely hear y'all's reasoning for any of them. Capella's rebounding, LeVert's shot creation, Terrence Mann's on-ball defense. You can name it all. Just let me know in the comments. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for videos every single day. We're gonna be pushing them out, keeping you guys updated and informed. Once again, thank you guys for watching. I'm Zach Langley, aka Langley ATL, and I'll see you guys next time.